whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So it is my true pleasure to give a warm welcome to the Prime Dean's Dialogue at the Prime Global Forum 2021, the demand and supply side of skills and mindsets for the future workforce. For me, it is an honor to have 3 internationally highly esteemed deans and a Vice Deputy Chancellor, former dean, with me here today from around the world. And it is my true privilege to moderate our panel to share with the audience experiences, challenges, and hopes from the dean's perspective of management education and how we can best in management education contribute to generate the talent that the world needs so urgently. Do we deliver what is needed? Can we do it even better? Many of you have seen of the deans here today have seen and supported the journey from the individual business ethics professor in the classroom to creating and supporting sustainability centers in your schools, in your universities. And most recently, you have all 4 of you also contributed to a more systematic integration of responsible management across all disciplines in your schools, in your universities. So in this panel, I will invite you to reflect on how do we develop business schools and universities that are able to inspire and educate our students to take on those future challenges. In a world of climate change, increasing inequalities, and not least a need to recover in the midst and in the wake of a global pandemic, how do we create institutions of higher education that can actually mobilize our students' talents and skills the very best way? So it is my true honor here today to introduce to you 4 esteemed deans and a former dean here with me. I have here on my wonderful panel here Daniel Tracher, Dean at Nova School of Business and Economics in Portugal. Welcome, Daniel. And I have here with me Inase Okonedo, Deputy Vice Chancellor and former Dean at Lagos Business School in Nigeria. Warm welcome to you also, Inase.
Thank you, Mette.
And Sergei Mursedov, Director and Professor and President of the IBS Moscow Ranepa School in Russia. Warm welcome also to you, Sergei.
Thank you.
And Vineta Stefanova Suleta, Dean at Universidad de los Andes in Colombia. Warm welcome to you also, Vineta.
Thank you, Mette.
So first, I will invite my panelists here to give a short introductory to the audience about what should we do to educate our students to become the global leaders that are needed from a dean's perspective. So Daniel, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mette. First of all, thank you for the great opportunity to be here to speak about something that I really believe it's really important, that we as business schools start a discussion, start a dialogue, and maybe change. I think dialogues are important, but they're very important when they lead to change. And so hopefully change is also on the way. And maybe I'll just make a few remarks, maybe why I think that change is so important. Because I do believe that, and I think we all agree on this, that the world is on a path that is not a very sustainable path. I mean, you mentioned just when you started the issues of inequalities, you mentioned the issues of climate change, but they're all issues of technology, they're all issues of politics in our day, issues of globalization that is creating more and more challenges. So if we had to itemize what we find are our challenges around the world, lots of questions and very few answers. And I think this is the reality of those who are entering the 21st century. Many questions, many challenges, and very, very few answers. And I do believe that we as universities and of course as business schools need to fundamentally take responsibility for finding those answers. And why? Because we are the place where we find answers. We are universities. We are here to think about the future. We are here to do research. We are here to actually consider the real challenge and find answers to them. And second, because we are educating the youth, we are educating the future. So we have, as universities, a fundamental responsibility with the future. And so when we are in a world where the future looks challenging, because there are many questions, there are very few answers, we need to come up with the answers, and we need to come up with the leaders that can transform those answers into reality and into action. And so we have to be at the forefront of actually addressing this and bringing the world back to a path that is sustainable, that is prosperous, that is inclusive, that is above all one of optimism for everybody, and that we all can share and that we all feel happy about the world. That's why the first thing we did at our school when we did our strategy is to call ourselves the school for the future. And it's not that we don't believe that the future is the schools are going to be like us. We believe that we as a school need to be really concerned about thinking about the future and where the future is taking us. And so that's the first thing. Okay? It is our utmost responsibility. It is the most important challenge that we live up to the expectations that society has on us as business schools, on us as universities. And so the second question is, of course, if this is our responsibility, if this is our call to action, what do we do? How do we address this? And I'm sure we're going to discuss this quite a bit, so I would just try to bring 2 or 3 ideas to start with. The first one is the idea that we no longer need to deliver only skills. We no longer need to deliver only hard skills. We no longer need to deliver soft skills. We need to reshape citizens. We need to reshape leaders. And this means putting a tremendous effort on how we inspire, more than just educate or shape, or other words, inspire this generation of leaders in terms of finding purpose, focusing on impact, and living up to their responsibility. So we can no longer just be a school. We are back to the academy, almost the way it was in old Greece, where we are here to really develop leaders, not just with the skills they need to be successful, but with the purpose, the notion of impact, the focus on responsibility that true leaders need to develop. Because only this way we are going to help build the coalitions, the leadership that will bring that world into that sustainable path. How we do this is a challenge, and this is something we can discuss. A second notion that is related to how we do this for us is that in order to build these leaders, we cannot just have faculty in a classroom delivering skills. We need to call in the entire society to work with us, the companies, the foundations, the nonprofits. And so the schools need to open up. We cannot, one of the coming back to things that we have done that are interesting at our school, one thing we did is our campus. We just built a new campus, and there are some pictures of it just behind me. It's a gorgeous campus. I invite you to discover. But the interesting thing about this campus is that you can walk in and walk out, whoever you are. People from the community can come here and play the piano if they want. And this notion of having the only way to build leaders for the future that are responsible, impact-driven, purpose-driven, is to basically make it a community-wide effort. And this means creating universities that are fundamentally open, fundamentally welcoming for different people, and there are almost platforms where the entire community comes together to think about the future. And this is, I think, a second important element: more openness and more inclusiveness and more engagement with the society overall. And the third thing I would like to also mention is that we need to walk the talk. And if we are concerned about impact, and if we believe that in the future, organizations, companies need to be fundamentally managed to create positive impact, and not just to generate shareholder value, but to actually generate impact and actually make the case that they and show evidence to the world that they are creating that impact. I believe that we as business schools need to create a model for what our impact is, commit to it, set targets, and tell the world that we are creating that impact. So in a nutshell, a broader encompassing development of these leaders for the future: purpose, responsibility, impact. A more open engagement with society so that we're all together in this effort of developing leadership and research for the future. And a model of impact where when we start demanding impact from our graduates, when we start demanding impact from the companies, that we ourselves as business schools show the world the impact we are creating, and build a model for it, I think are just 3 steps among many others that we need to take as business schools. And I think that will put us on a path for a future that is not just for us, but for the entire world, a future that is one of hope, that has none of those challenges that you highlighted in your initial speech, but has all the opposites. It's about inclusiveness, sustainability, prosperity, peace, and all those values that really are the ones that are the most positive among us as humanity. So I'll stop here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Daniel, for these inspiring words, and for emphasizing also, say, our own responsibility to actually walk the talk. And the building behind you is one example of how you, amongst other things, do that. And at the Nova School. So thank you very much for this inspiring talk. And I would now like to hand over to you, Inase Okonedo, and from your position, from your being a former dean and now a vice deputy chancellor at the Penn University, please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mete. You know, I like the question, because the question is not just about what do we do to educate our students to be leaders, but to be global leaders that are needed. And I like the emphasis on what is needed, because if we look at the world today and we look at the factors that are shaping the world of business today, the recent pandemic, which is you know, what a lot of businesses have just experienced, the first in recent times, but perhaps not the last in recent time, in the future. We then have to think about what we need to do. And I think it goes beyond a number of things. I think it cuts across a number of things. One is really, what do we teach to the students? The second is, how do we teach the students? And then the third is, who teaches the students in order to develop the students to be global leaders? And when we talk about global leaders, I like to think about global leaders, about us developing students or individuals who can influence and inspire various stakeholders from multiple cultures across diverse groups in an increasingly uncertain world. And that's a tall order, because there are many variables. So the first is that, you know, we're dealing with a multitude of stakeholders, as opposed to the past, when we used to educate students to perform solely for one group of stakeholders, which were the shareholders. Increasingly, it's broader. So now we're looking at a group of stakeholders. We're looking at diverse populations, and we're looking to develop them in a world that today, this is what we know. We know today that technology is shaping things. We know the effects of COVID, but that's today. The future is unknown, it's uncertain, and it's likely to be complex. So I think that when we think about how we're going to develop the students, we need to look at the what that we're teaching them, and it has to go beyond the knowledge that they're giving. Given the rate at which knowledge is being generated, I would say exponentially, there's nothing that we teach the students of today that is likely to be relevant in the short to medium term, given the rate knowledge is being. Therefore, they need the know-how. They need to develop certain competences to be able to do the work of today. But beyond that, we need to give a thought to how we're developing them for the future that they don't know, which leads us to an emphasis more, perhaps for me, it's more about the attitudes, the mindsets that we're developing the students to have. The whole thing about lifelong learning. So that's the one. The second, and perhaps I draw from the recent experiences of COVID, is the importance of values and the whole thing about what is the purpose of business? Is it really to further business? Or should we be looking at business, as I've often said, as a way to further humanity? And if that is the case, really, how do we form that attitude in the leaders that we're developing today to have a mindset that is considerate and takes action towards societal impact? So these are the buckets of things that I think that we have to consider, some within, some without the business school ecosystem, that I'll be happy to talk more about as the conversation proceeds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inase, for pointing out the sort of important, we need to ask the what, the how, the who teaches actually our students. And I think this is actually in many ways reinforcing what Daniel already is talked about, that we need to bring in new stakeholders to the classroom to help us educate and teach students for the future. Thank you very much for this inspirational first words, Inase. And now over to you, Sergey, from the dean's chair, the director's chair at one of the large schools in Moscow, in Russia. So please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Meta. It's my great pleasure and honor today to talk with the outstanding people who are working for the sake of prime principles. I consider that those principles are of greatest importance, and I'm very proud that in 2008, my business school and my university were the first in Russia to sign the Charter of Prime. And then I'm also very proud that my business school became Prime champion. And now about the leadership for the future, and it's a great puzzle for all the business schools across the world. When we are discussing that, we understand that simultaneously with a lot of skills, we also have to help the proper programming of our students, starting from bachelor level and finishing with executive retraining level, to reprogram them partially for the new system of values, from the values where at the center profit existed, where the whole orientation of business school was connected with shareholders' value, to the stakeholders' value, to the values of the people of this planet. And we understand that the grads of business school, they should have certain talents, certain skills, certain abilities in leadership. First of all, this is creative thinking, and lots of people are discussing about that. But at our business school, and the majority of business school in Russia, we assume that creative system is not sufficient. We also need entrepreneurial way of thinking, entrepreneurial way of leadership. Many years ago, when I was lucky to study at Harvard Business School, one of the professors outlined sort of a maxim to us. He told us all the people of the world are subdivided in two only groups: those who are problem solvers and those who are problem makers. And there is nothing in between. And we want our students not to be just problem makers, not to be even analysts. I understand that analytics is very important. We do not like our grads to talk about the problems. We want them to look for the ways how to solve those problems. And that means that we help them to be trained or retrained with emotional intelligence, with cultural intelligence, with agility approach, with the ability to work in a team and over the project, and for leadership to develop the future ecosystem, green economy. They make our planet better within the coming decades. And from our perception, the most important thing is not only to place pieces of prime inside the syllabus of the programs. We did that, and it's very important, but it's not sufficient. We're always in search of the team project, which shows different side of values connected with this work for the stakeholders' satisfaction. And I shall make one small example of the case, which I like very much. 3 years ago, my university, and it's the biggest university of Russia with 200,000 of students, had 53 campuses across our huge country. We organized the students of all those campuses to select rotten batteries for electric appliances. When they put all those batteries together, we sent them to the enterprise of one of our grads of executive MBA program, who regenerated them in fact, made certain profit and transferred the major part of this profit to the Association of Disabled Blind People of Russia. And those people with their hands made more than 1,000 of birds' houses to be fixed on the trees. And then the circle came to the end. Those students who were selecting, looking for the rotten batteries, they got those birds' houses and placed them on numerous trees across Russia. Lots of complexity, lots of interaction and synergy of different stratas of people, where we can see how business can help the disabled people and how all together they have to bring up the mentality of the younger people for the principles of prime, for the principles of social responsibility, for the principles of sustainable development of our world. We assume that the most important thing in our today's activities, in the activities of business universities and business schools, is to organize meetings of our students with the students from different countries across the world, where they can discuss in their language, with their new generation's value system, the most important problems which are discussed at the rostrums of the United Nations organizations. And finally, again, one small example, every April, and I'm using this opportunity to invite your students to participate next year. Every April, we organize a huge online free of charge conference in English. This year, students of more than 20 countries across the globe, from Latin America, Africa, Asia, to say nothing of Russia and former republics of Soviet Union, today the countries of Commonwealth of Independent States, students participated, and they were talking about green economy, about pollution, about unjust redistribution of wealth in our planet, about the green economy and opportunity, about the sustainability of economic development. All the major world problems were under discussion. And when I was following those students, that I was moving in between the sessions, just as a follower, I was so happy because the young generation, they were looking in their way, and I could thinking, and I could feel their concern. I could feel their motivation to do something for the principles of sustainable development. And I consider if we make more of such events, of such interactions, we shall bring a lot of good for our planet. And it would correspond to the great principles of prime. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Sergey, for these for your introductory remark here, and for sort of emphasizing also the need for the entrepreneurial way forward, and to sort of establish that kind of mindset amongst our students, that it's not you as a passive student receiving information from the authority, the professor, but it is actually also thinking about how do we mobilize student agency. And in your wonderful case with the batteries, this is exactly what you did and what your students did. So thank you for that example. I think that is exactly what we want to support in Prime as well. Thank you very much. Now, Vineta, over to you. Sort of, I'm looking forward to hear your reflections, and again, being a dean in Colombia, and the work that you have been sort of supporting for a long period of time for responsible management with your faculty and with your students. Over to you.
Thank you, Mete. It's a great opportunity to contribute to the conversation, and I'm learning so much from my colleagues. I have a couple of ideas I'd like to share, as I believe they add to the conversation. And the first one is related to how we think of Universidad de los Andes School of Management. Note that we never say we are a business school, and we never did. Ever. We have always identified us as a school of management, basically because the way we think of our role is as embedded into a broader societal network. And certainly our goal has always help frameworks of the leaders of the future, but we never said the business leaders of the future. So the way we will work with the community is also the result of the way institutions work in our part of the world, and the need to be very flexible, very resilient, and work under conditions of a very high uncertainty, not because of COVID or not from 3 years ago, but forever. And this type of very dynamic, to some degree unpredictable environment has driven all sorts of organizations into experimentation. And what we can say is that there are really a lot of case studies, a lot of research and field work done where we believe we have a great opportunity to leverage on our knowledge and find a stronger voice at the current moment, where the South can lecture the North on issues that are related to sustainability and regeneration, to social justice and inclusion. And I think that the very complexity of the Colombian and more broadly speaking, Latin American environment, we can all tune to the news today and see what is going on the streets, literally real time, has actually been a long-term kind of an environment that has been providing us with the stories. Now we have to sit down and write the theory. That's what we are discussing with my colleagues at the School of Management, as we think it's our time to bring the lessons from the South to the world in, a newly found voice. And I think this is how we think about the current moment and how we think about the future. And certainly the way we conceive the programs, we do have programs, and we very much emphasize sustainable development and environmental protection and so forth. But just a few days ago, we launched our newest program on regeneration. And when we talk about regeneration, we certainly conceive it in environmental, but also social aspects. And we have the ambition not only to teach in the sense to preach, but to co-create the program with local communities very far away from Colombia's capital. And this is why we launched it online, because we want these communities to be fully engaged with us, no matter where they're located. And this is, I believe, one of the examples of how we think on the how question. And from where I see it, and my colleagues look at the opportunities and challenges, we believe that what we most need at the moment is courage. We, to some degree, expect some of the answers to be found somewhere else. And we have been modest, and maybe we lack the courage to raise our voice and find our own way of how to solve these problems with sufficient confidence. And I believe it's our time, and this is what we are working on. We try to create the environment and the incentives and the self-confidence in our communities, so that we all build more courage in order to take the first steps, because we do have the network, because we do have the knowledge, and we just need the courage. This is what we believe is the missing element, and the one that is most needed at our current moment as a School of Management, Mete.
No, thank you so much, Vineta, for this. I think this is, I really like, what you're saying about the knowledge from the South to the North. I mean, it used to be knowledge from the North to the South. Then we had a period where the South was sort of, really developing, focusing on developing case studies, texts, research from the South to the south. And now the movement that you are alluding to here, you pointing towards is, of course, how can the North learn from the South? And we see that in many instances. And as Inessa will know, every time I go to the Africa Academy of Management, and I was lately or last year in Nigeria visiting you when you were hosting, every time, each session of research from these scholars from all over Africa, it is not just research, it is research on the ground, exactly what you're saying, Vanessa, out there, engaging with the local society, having impact on the ground. And I'm so impressed every time. So I think you're on a good route here, and I would love to explore how we can even support you on this journey within Prime. Thank you so much for this. But now I'd like to return to you, Daniel, and sort of try to ask you, and I really follow you. I really like what you're doing, and I like the words that you put into, the prosperous society, inclusive society, and I truly enjoy the optimism that you also encourage the rest of us to follow. But what does it mean for our educators? How do you as a dean sort of support your faculty in not just being excellent researchers, but also being excellent educators? What can you do as a dean? What are the leverages that you take into action to support the pedagogical skills of your faculty? You're muted, Daniel.
To answer your question, I'm going to come back to issues that have come up and that have been raised here. Because when you think about, so preparing our students for the future, this is what we're all talking about here, about responsible leadership. And then you have Sergey talked about entrepreneurial mindset. Veneta talked about feeling, and learning from understanding of the way people live, that emotion, that contact. She talked about courage. And so the real interesting question is, how do we bring students into a classroom and make them learn entrepreneurial mindset, empathy, courage? I say we can't. I really say we can't. We need to get out of the classroom a little bit more. And we need to make our educational process, and this is exactly what Veneta was alluding to, an experience. So students have to live, feel, learn, gain courage and empowerment, and feel ready to change. And faculty has to be a part of this. So I'm gonna, and Veneta just shared some experience. I'm gonna talk about one of these experiences that we're having. So what we are developing here is, instead of actually sending our students to go outside to companies, we're bringing companies onto the campus. So we're creating what we call an innovation ecosystem here. We're going to have companies, startups, foundation, nonprofit, and the students are going to learn through project-based learning in the campus, not in the classroom, but on the campus, in the campus, with the faculty aligned to it. And so in the end, the way we develop our students is with a coalition that includes faculty, the companies, that's what I was mentioning before, includes a whole array of stakeholders that have different skills, that have different experiences, that can provide different experiences to students and allow them to learn in all these different dimensions. And so I think the real challenge for all of us is not just to think of how do you just make faculty teach these things. It's about the pedagogy and make faculty a part of the experience, but make it much broader, with more stakeholders, with more experience, with more challenges to solve, with more problems to fix, with more people to help, with more of a sense that I can make a difference, with more of a sense of building purpose. There is no way you can do these things in the classroom with faculty. However much you train, it's just impossible to do it. So, and this, I come back to Vanessa's point, we are testing. And the real challenge for all of us is to test, to learn, to improve, and to share amongst ourselves what is happening. And this is where Prime can be a tremendous help, right? I mean, I think what we need is more fora where we are sharing this. When Vanetta is telling us, listen, we're doing this experience and it worked out, or Sergey or Inaz is telling, we did this and it worked out, and I come back here and experience it on my campus and it works. Because we need to fundamentally rediscover, we need to really rediscover what a management school, a business school, a management education, a business education is, what we deliver and how we deliver it. And so I think more than just telling you what I do, and we do all these sorts of things I was telling you, the companies on campus, the faculty associated with it, the students traveling abroad with faculty to experience different environments, taking them to the developing country context to learn about empowerment, change, reality. I mean, it's one thing if you cannot learn about responsibility in a classroom with faculty showing you pictures. You can't. You need to go out, live with the people that are going through these hardships and understand not just the reality, but also the power that you can have to transform people's lives. And when you leave not just with a few skills, with some knowledge, but with tremendous inspiration, courage, and empowerment of the difference you can make. Yeah. And this is the point.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Daniel, for this. I would almost call it like a call for action, you know, that you put into the room here. I really enjoy that, and I really think you're right about, you know, that you have to make faculty a part of the experience and not sort of only think about the, you know, educational skills of advancing them in faculty and in the educators. So thank you so much for this you know, reflection here. And Inasa, can I take you on to the next question here about, you know, the future that we don't know? What are those skills that you're thinking that the students should acquire for the future that we do not know, as you put it before, that, and the lifelong learning? I hear a lot about lifelong learning, but it's very rare that I see it actually happening in reality, you could say.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to get them to want lifelong learning. And I guess that, you know, the pedagogy that we use in teaching or developing the students when they come into the school is helpful. If you use an approach in which you have the professor, that professors, a sage approach, in which is giving them all the information that they need, there's little or no inspiration for them to go seeking that. And therefore, you have to think, what is the pedagogy that's going to stretch their thinking, that's going to hone their critical thinking skills, deepen their analytical skills, so that when they face the real life problems, they can encounter that. Now, previously, we either use that approach or we use the case study method. And all of us know case studies. We've written about something that's happened in the company. We bring the person and say, okay, if you were there, what would have happened? What would you have done? But that's in the past. This uncertain world that I speak about, we cannot write case studies because we do not know what it is that's going to happen. And therefore, the approach to how we develop the students to long for this, to want to learn, is important. And when we talk about the skills, I think that it's really the analytical, the critical thinking. Of course, before COVID, we were talking about artificial intelligence, you know, all those digital skills. Of course, those still come. But what about things about how do you lead in uncertain, since we're talking about developing global leaders, how do you lead in uncertain times? What sort of skills does the leader need in periods of uncertainty? What about risk management, especially in these uncertain times? What about resilience? What about agility? Because if you delay too much in making a decision, how do you build those? And again, you know, what Dan has said is especially important to say these people will learn by doing, by experiencing, for things that they've known, which is actually working with the practitioners. But I think that one of the most critical skills for a leader that perhaps at business schools and management schools we have often underlooked, but I saw the importance during this COVID times, is empathy. Can you teach people to be empathetic? And really, how do you teach people to not only be socially conscious, but really to do something that benefits the society? So at Lagos Business School, for instance, where I was dean for 11 and a half years, one of the ways that we did that outside of the knowledge was to task all the students on the full-time MBA program. Day one, we talked to them about the personal social responsibility project, which they're supposed to think about, write about, and actually implement, so that they can do things within the community that are impactful, and it carries credit. That's where they learn that it goes, that business and management goes beyond self and it's about the community. And I think that perhaps maybe in this part we're more attuned as to the importance. We once had a renowned professor who several decades ago, he said something that remains in our consciousness till today, where he says the poor cannot sleep because they're hungry, and the rich cannot sleep because the poor are hungry and awake. Talking about the need for us to reduce the income disparity, what Sergio alluded to when he was speaking. So therefore, we make it to say, look, it is our collective interest. And if you think about a term that has been popularized that I think originated in South Africa, that's termed Ubuntu, I am because you are. It shows the importance of that society. And therefore, these are the things that we try and inculcate in the students, and we try and develop all the skills through not only how we teach, but the projects that we engage them in. And I agree absolutely with Daniel, all that can be done within the classroom. So it's all about outside the classroom as well as inside the classroom. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for the outside, inside classroom, but also for emphasizing the empathy. I think it's fair to say that it is a concept, and the whole idea about bringing in the emotional skills into the classroom of leadership education is not something we discussed, let's say, only 5 years ago. And today we hear this more and more, and even also from this wonderful panel here, you are all alluding to in different ways of how this is very necessary for our students to engage in. Sergey, and before I hand over to you, Vineta, for a final comment here, because this is always the case happening on these panels, that we have too little time and there's too much wonderful things going on that we would like to explore even more. So Sergey and Vineta, I will invite you also for, like Daniel and Inasa, for a final comment here. And I would like to ask you, Sergey, on your sort of, what are the, Inasa mentioned, of course, the COVID has challenged us, and perhaps we really need to rethink higher education. In what do you see as the most important new challenge, new change that the post-COVID situation will have for your school? You're muted, Sergey. You are muted. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much for the great question. When COVID covered Russia, comprising my university and my business school, we got so-called effect of the burning platform. For almost a decade, we were talking our professors into jumping to the online education. And they were explaining us hundreds of reasons why immediately now they are not ready to do that and why it should be postponed. When COVID came, in 4 days, our whole bachelor education went online. And then we were following by the anonymous polls, asking questions to the students and professors, what are their emotions about all that? And we got pretty interesting results that was under the change through the time. 2 months after the beginning of this online education, the vast majority of professors, almost 80% were saying, we're tired of online. You see, we cannot change by online the campus education, etc. With students, it was plus minus 50-50. Then, when COVID situation in half a year in our country was plus minus over and we returned back to the classroom, all of a sudden, these both students and professors told us, but we'd like to keep that plus minus 50% because online has a lot of new possibilities. We want to be on campus. We need campus to exchange opinion, to communicate, for networking, for university atmosphere, but still we don't want to lose the opportunity to interact with the people of the planet, with the experts from other parts of the country. And it was our first feeling. Your crisis always brings opportunities. We just have to use them. And second observation, the word is very fragile. We sent our spaceships to the space. We have fantastic planet. We have lots of industry. We have high tech. But when pandemic came, all of us, we started feeling that is fragile. We are not completely protected. And I shall finish with a small case study. I have a country house 400 kilometers from Moscow in the forest, where everything is on electricity. And then there was a storm, and the tree fell down, and the electricity was cut for 2 days. And I found out my internet doesn't work. In 5 hours, my telephone stopped functioning. TV doesn't work, electricity doesn't work. I cannot cook with my electric, what's the English for? The refrigerator died. We are so fragile, and small group of people can pollute the world, can spoil the world, and we need our common efforts to save this world. And let us try to do that within the Prime movement together with our students. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for this, and thank you for the also pointing out, as you say, the fragility of the world, the need to collectively address these problems and collaborate towards on this important journey. Sergey, thank you very much for this. Now over to you, Vineta, for a final comment from you on what's ahead for us. What is your recommendation to us as educators? To what is the next big step for us to take here?
I'd like to connect very briefly to the words of my colleagues here and connect to each one of their arguments in this round of questions, Mete. The first one, I would say, I believe we need to work together. And this was an argument made by Danielle, that we need to experiment and learn from each other, as we don't have the time to run individually all the experiments that come to mind. So maybe explaining the success stories, but also some of the not so successful stepping stones to future success, I will call them. Maybe we should start discussing those as well. I think the methods part needs a lot of experimentation, and I agree with Anase that the empathy that case studies have been building for years in the classroom, maybe we need to step them up into and go into the field, but also think about even going further than that. I would like to offer here one, let's say, a bit more philosophical take on your question, and go to the Sergey's country house example and say, when disasters happen, we tend to expand our moral circle and be more inclusive and be more conscious about what is around us. So maybe a discussion about precisely the boundary of the moral circle that I believe can be expanded through not only through our rational thinking and modeling, but also emotionally, but also sensory. And I believe that we have to do some hard experimentation on the methods part, because I believe we are many hundred years behind in terms of our knowledge of how to create that consciousness. And that's my first point. And my second and last is, I believe Prime can be a great platform so that we can learn as a group and don't incur into the learning cost, which can be really prohibitive for some of us. So that will be my answer.
No, thank you so much, Vineta, for these comments, and also for the sort of pointing to perhaps we should start thinking about sharing the not so successful stories, because they are, as we know, as much a source of inspiration and learning. It is a bit of a daunting task, though, to show your weak moments, but I think it is a very, very good suggestion. Daniel, this is a very, very 30-second invitation to you before we round off here.
I just want to say two things that I learned from COVID. One is that, we were so afraid of digital, and in the end, we all got desperate when we got home, and we had the best videos we could do everything at home, and yet we wanted to be together. And that was, for me, the most important lesson, is this togetherness is what defines us. And there is no way digital is going to root out this togetherness. And this is a wonderful message of hope. The second message of hope is that we had a huge crisis, and we solved it in 2 years. If we had the same stamina to address the sustainability crisis, we would have gone much further away. So, sense of urgency gets human beings to work together and solve big crises. So I think there are two wonderful messages of hope, that one of togetherness and that the power of urgency, that I think are wonderful for our future, which we were all worried, but I think these are wonderful news for the future that we have as a humanity and as human beings.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for this was such an optimistic note to end this fantastic, fabulous panel and all the input, all the insights that you provided from different parts of the world, from your different experiences. And exactly, Daniel, what you're pointing out here, I think Sergey also very well, I mean, you are, you know, director dean of a school with 200,000 students, and that you in 4 days could turn around the education to go online is indeed a sort of a sign of hope for the rest of us working in smaller schools as well. It can be done large scale as well. So I just want to thank you all for, you know, pointing to the need for societal impact, for inclusivity, openness, and even for, you know, daring to come up with a new vocabulary about the need for empathy amongst our students, the emotional skills and the collectivity working together, and not least South-North working together, perhaps in new ways, as has also been alluded to here. Thank you so much to all four of you, Daniel, Sergey, Veneta, Inace. I really appreciate you taking the time for this conversation. And I would be looking forward to continue the conversation with you in other formats and in other screens, and hopefully also in person very soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mette. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you to everyone.